that we're all aware about it. If you get that email and you want to know why your son or daughter is not passing class, I will not know the specifics unless it's one of my classes. If it's another class, I would say you should have a contact that teacher to know specifically why. Now, everybody kind of understand the probation. All right, on the probation for the first week, they are still allowed to attend all practices, participate in all games and contests, be a regular, member of the team. What our expectation is that they go during the homeroom or resource, they go and they get help from that teacher to improve that grade. The second week in a row, not just the second week, so it is week 4, the following Monday and week 5. If your son or daughter is still on the F or the incomplete list with the same class, then they have a week that begins in eligibility. The variation between an F and an incomplete, if they have an F on that following Monday still in the same class, and the teacher has not notified me that reasonable progress has been made, they are ineligible for 1 week. That means they can still go to practices, team events, but they're not allowed to participate in any games or contests. So they would expect it to be there kind of dressed in street clothes. That's if they get an F for that whole following week and that following Monday. If they have raised the grade, then they regain their eligibility. That is different than if they have an incomplete or an I. An incomplete means they are missing something. Maybe they were sick and they missed a test. Sometimes certain teachers, if they're not passing all the standards, will give them an incomplete. The difference between an F and an incomplete is that if an incomplete, the instant that grade is made up and the instant that I'm notified, they regain their eligibility. So on week 5, let's say your son or daughter still has an incomplete, we'll just say in biology class. You get notified, you get another phone call, another email, I hand them another piece of paper, or say that I'm making it, and I say, that's good, as soon as it's made up, have the teacher let me know. Let's say they make it up that day, but they make it up second period. Teacher says, Mr. Baldwin, give me a call, they give me an email saying, Mr. Baldwin, Johnny or Jenny has made it to class, they now have a D or a C or a B in my class. I say thank you, then I let their coach know, and I let the student know, you are now eligible. So in theory, an incomplete is what we really strive our teachers to give, because it gives the opportunity for the student to earn back their eligibility that week. Instead of having to sit the whole week, the instant they make up the grade, they regain their eligibility. We always stress that a lot in our in-service days coming up, that it's much easier to give back a student an I, their eligibility, than if you give them an F for missing work. To give them an F, that's different than an incomplete. Are there any questions on how we interpret the F versus the incomplete? Now, when we look at the ineligibility, it does not accumulate. In theory, your child could be on probation week 4, week 6, week 8 for the same class and never actually lose any of their ability to play the game, because it's every other week. It always resets once they get their name off. I've actually had some students that alternate classes. Week 4 is science, week 5 math, week 6 science. And since it's not the same class 2 weeks in a row, they actually don't lose their ability to participate. When we first started this, a lot of people kind of were taken back, but as it's gone, as the kids are getting used to it, there's not a lot of panic. It helps communicate them. Because they are student athletes and they do, get the notice, then most of the time, I'd say 95% of the time, that grade is remedied and they get their grades back up to passing. So it's just another tool that we look at with use communication. Are there any questions on the eligibility, academic eligibility? All right, the last thing I want to talk about tonight is our co-curricular code. Our co-curricular code begins, I believe, on page 5. Sorry, top of page 5. And the reason it says revised 2017, we actually added a phrase to the suspension. When we talk about the co-curricular code, what we're looking at are for violations, whether they're using drugs or alcohol, or any conduct that would be considered unbecoming. For example, if they were to get in trouble, it has been used for serious suspensions from school, but also if they were to get in trouble in the community. Sometimes we've had students that have got caught in the past, breaking the law, whether it was a disorderly conduct ticket, maybe like a shoplifting or other things along those lines. that in the past, the administration has reserved the right to count that as a code violation if it is serious enough. Not necessarily like speeding or a parking ticket, but more serious kind of breaches there. They have been considered code violations. When you look at the code violation, and if you've been a parent before, not much has changed. The one thing that I would like to add to as in change on page 7, it talks about additional penalty information. It is shaded gray. On the electronic copy that I will send out in the morning, it'll be highlighted yellow. What it says is, this is a new for this year, when serving a suspension, if the current season is more than 1/3 of the way complete, a student may not join a team to serve the suspension. Speaking frank to that issue, last year we had some people make some poor decisions in the fall, and they went out very late to join sports teams at the last minute to serve part of their suspension. So what we've decided is that that option is no longer. If you are not, let's say I make a mistake where I'm not playing a fall sport, but let's say I'm a basketball player. Let's say it's about October 5th and it's homecoming and I get caught drinking. I can't decide to go out for football for 2 weeks and start serving some of my suspension then. I have to wait till the actual next season. It has to be less than 1/3 complete before it's a reasonable time to join. So we felt some people have we're kind of closing that loophole, I guess is the best way for me to describe it as far as how we're doing that. All the other information is in there as well. A couple things, the first offense is 25% of the season. The second offense is half of the season. The third offense is 1 calendar year. There is an honesty clause in there. You know, if your student athlete were to make a mistake, and in the first offense, they are allowed, if they're honest, they come in and self-report, says, hey, Mr. Baldwin or Mr. Dorgan, I made a mistake, this weekend I was drinking. There is that option for the penalty to be reduced in half. So it's 25% of your season of what the expected regular season is. You don't normally count the WIA games because there's not always a guarantee in some sports that you have a 10th game like in football. You have to qualify for that. So we count the regular season games. Are there any questions? If you want to look at the appeal procedure, the appeal procedure is listed kind of, make sure you got that, hold on page 8, and that process there shows the outline for what the priorities will be. After you receive written notification of appeal, you have 5 business days to contact the office to set up an appeal. What the appeal is, the principal will then collect 3 staff members not associated with the program, and then you guys kind of make your appeal to them. Mr. Dorgan or myself will then present what we have found out, and then they make a decision. If you aren't happy with that, you can then still appeal to Mr. Carls, our superintendent. Okay? Are there any questions on the code? On the last thing, just the highlights, there are some additional guidelines in there. There's also some communication expectations listed on page 9. What we like to talk about usually, most of our coaches, they've explained this to you, usually have what we call a 24-hour rule. If they have concerns, their coach talk to them. If you have a concern about your coach, you can always talk to me. I will listen to your concerns. I will take them down. And then we will go from there, okay? Are there any questions? Okay. One thing, football will be staying in here. Volleyball will be going across the hall. Cross country will be in the McDonald's tables. But before you go, each coach has a little sign-in sheet. In the first column, just write your name and then how many athletes you have, and then sign-ins next to them. I have 2 spaces. If you have 3 or 4 or 5, just keep going and filling down. That's fine. The next person signed up there. Once again, I'd like to thank you for your time this evening. Again, I apologize for the shortness of the notice, but at this time, you can head on out to your respective meetings.